Okay, let's begin with your names.
Hi, I'm Sara.
Hi, my name is Tanner.
And I'm Briana.
Okay, good. Majors?
I'm movement science major.
I'm a kinesiology pre-med major.
And I am a biology pre-med major also.
Okay, and you all are part of the same class. What class is it?
Yes, we are in the honors class called Cultural Contact Zones, the Americas.
Can you give us some information about the class?
Yeah, so this semester we are looking at a lot of countries in North and South America. So we've been analyzing through presentations and class discussions about their economics, their politics, their government, their culture, and also current issues that are going on in these countries. And so we've done presentations to further look into what is going on. Three main topics, which are environment, migration, and women and gender issues. So we've been able to dissect those topics and come to a conclusion in our class.
And you three are preparing a project that is very interesting. Can you talk about this project?
Yes, so this project is called Bringing the Americas to Class, and so we spend all semester really diving into the intricacies of all of the countries in the Americas, and this project is really connecting what we do in class to the real world. And so, we are bringing in somebody from an organization, from a nonprofit, that has to do with something in the Americas, in Latin America, and we are interviewing them as a class and really learning about what the information that we learn in class, what that means in the real world.
Mm-hmm. And this hasn't been very easy, right? Because of course this is part of a long process.
So the process we had to take to make this whole thing happen was we did a lot of extensive research on good organizations that were out in the field that we've been researching, and we found an organization and we contacted the good representative of their of the organization, and they emailed us back. We went back and forth pretty much and scheduled a time to set up an interview that worked on both ends. And prior to conducting the interview, we did a connection test where we were introduced to the person that we were interviewing, and kind of went over the things that we're going to be talking about in the interview, get to know each other a little bit. And our class has a discussion thread where the interview questions that we'll be asking during the interview are going to be posted. So we're going to send that to her, and then we're going to talk during the interview.
Hi everyone, my name's Meredith Fabian Ludke. I'm the Vice President for Latin America at Covenant House. Covenant House is located, we're headquartered in New York City, but we have sites in 6 countries and 31 cities. So we're in Canada, across the United States, in Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. We work with homeless kids. So at all of our sites, you'll see shelters for homeless kids with wraparound services. And that's really what we do. We work with homeless and vulnerable youth, and we're a nonprofit. Has anybody heard of us? Are you familiar with us in Texas?
I don't think so.
No, we are in Houston. We're not in Dallas and Fort Worth, but we are in your state. As the Vice President of Latin America, I really wear a lot of different hats. I do fundraising, advocacy, human resources. I am involved in programs, so really have a lot of hats, and my expertise is in nonprofit management with a focus on homeless youth across the Americas, since we are in 6 countries across the Americas, which I thought this was such a perfect fit since you guys are looking at the Americas and where we're geographically located. I've been working at Covenant House for 14 years. I've worked at our sites in New York and Alaska, and I've been the Vice President of our Latin America team for the past 6 years. I had my roots in Latin America after undergrad. I did a study abroad actually in Ecuador, and that's where I fell in love with Latin America. And then after graduating from undergrad, I worked with street kids in Brazil and Peru. And I had that experience in between my undergrad and then and then I decided to go and get my master's and focus on international educational development at Columbia University in New York City. And at that time, I started working with Covenant House as well, because they were one of the premier NGOs and largest NGOs providing services for homeless youth and street kids. So it connected very well to my studies. I really see my career as a vocation, and I'm really passionate about social justice issues. So when we talk about homelessness, there's a lot of justice and equality and poverty issues, like social issues that go into that, which I find very fulfilling about this work as well. So that's a little bit about me. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions for me about my role at Covenant House, or I know we've got lots of questions about Covenant House in general. I'd love to make it like interactive too. So I know you guys all scripted fantastic questions, and we're going to get to all of them, but please feel free at any moment if you have any questions, insert them along the way.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. The first questions are about the overall structure of the Covenant House and the different locations. So Nick, okay, so I'll let Nick go ahead and ask his question about the organization sites.
Okay, so with your organization spanning across like multiple countries, obviously, and such a big umbrella of influence, do you have the same overall structure and operating process or in each location, or is like each country and house unique in its own way?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, when you go to Covenant Houses across the 31 cities where we are, you will find almost the exact same thing. You'll find, there are exceptions, but one thing that's very similar is we're shelters in all of these places. So you can walk into a Covenant House, and we will be a 24-hour shelter for homeless youth with wraparound social services, meaning doctors, lawyers, educational specialists. So you'll find that at every Covenant House. What also makes us unique is that we have an open door policy, so kids can come to us on their own choice, and they can also leave our doors on their own choice 24 hours a day. With the exception in Guatemala, it's a safe house for girls who are specifically survivors of human trafficking and exploitation. And those girls are referred to us by the court system. So there's not an open door there, but across all of our other Covenant Houses, we're very similar. And we're really united by our mission. I think a lot of times in nonprofit work, mission guides the nonprofit. And we happen to have one that's very rooted in absolute love and unconditional respect. And that's definitely something like a value we bring into our work that you'll see anywhere. And we have the same logo and all of that. So our marketing and branding is similar. So yes, we have a very similar structure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, well, we can go ahead and move on to the next question regarding the structure of the Covenant House with Carson Jones.
Oh.
Very good question.
Hi, I'm Carson Jones, by the way. And with an organization spanning across several countries and one that's dedicated to stopping such a horrific thing as human trafficking, in what area has your organization seen major results? And in what areas would it be a little bit harder for you to prevent such things?
Great. You know, one of the things we definitely see results in is ending homelessness. I mean, that's our expertise. Somebody comes to us, they're homeless, and many times we're able to break that cycle, especially because we work with young people. So they're beginning in life, and if they can get the support and services they need. We do see a lot of positive results, and I just want to mention our results. About 5 years ago, we took on an initiative, and you're seeing a lot of nonprofits do this, where you can track the outcomes and impact of your work. Like, we really want to be data informed about our work as well. So we implemented a whole standardized key performance indicator measurement set that can really measure what kind of results we're getting and what's working and what isn't. And we have a database called Efforts to Outcomes that social service providers and public and nonprofit governments, nonprofit organizations will use to actually enter that data and be able to do a lot of sophisticated analysis around the impact of our work. And we have a lot of positive results around education outcomes in people's lives, housing, of course, to go and gain stable housing, employment, overcoming addictions, improving from trauma and mental health improvement. So I would say those are some of the things. And then even on the advocacy, and because in addition to providing services, we're always trying to advocate for policies that are favorable to the most vulnerable youth that are in our country and across all these countries. And an exciting one that was passed in April of 2018 that we worked very hard on, and even our president was at the White House, signing the bill. It was called Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, SESTA. And this was really key and a really big win because it gives us the ability to stop things like sex trafficking online. So there was a lot of perpetrators going online and targeting vulnerable youth and pulling them into human trafficking situations. So that's considered a really big win too when it comes to seeing a major result even in public policy in the United States. The areas that are harder are really, and you guys probably got into this in your class, is to get at the root causes of homelessness. A lot of homelessness is within the context and trafficking and vulnerable, and sexual exploitation. And I make that connection between homelessness and trafficking and exploitation because a lot of times homeless youth are at a much greater risk to be trafficked because you're living on the streets, you need a place to stay, you'll have sex for money, you're just much more vulnerable. So we see there's a strong link between human trafficking and homelessness and a risk there. And that's why we're also working with trafficking victims. But the things that are harder is that things like poverty and violence, like a lot of times homelessness will come out of poverty, right? And those are just much larger economic issues that are happening. Like we work in Nicaragua, which is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So there is not a strong economy there. Or places like Honduras, they have a city called San Pedro Sula, where we're located on the border of Guatemala. We have a migrant program there. Is one of the deadliest cities in the world that is not in war. And what happens is some of these factors like violence and poverty just exacerbate and can cause a lot of exploitation and vulnerabilities for youth. And these are harder things that they need all your bright minds and efforts to, help us work at and around the world. But those things are harder to get at. And also things like changing attitudes. Racism is really popular. We find it's interesting in the United States, if you're Black or an African American youth, you have 83% higher risk of becoming homeless. There's things like discrimination against LGBTQ youth and for your sexual orientation. So things like behaviors and attitudes that are in cultures. For example, Indigenous people in Canada are more likely to become homeless. So some of these things with racism and attitudes and cultural perceptions are really harder. We try to get at them and we're good at homelessness, but there's this whole other socioeconomic, cultural, political thing that's creating these vulnerabilities that is, a lot of work.
Definitely. All right, thank you. Now I think we're gonna move on to the day-to-day operations of the Covenant House. Okay. And we'll start with a question from Miranda.
Yeah, so I'm Miranda. My question is, so these children have likely been through trauma and dramatic transitions. So how does the Covenant House hope to support these children into the future? And more specifically, how are they being educated, involved in their communities, and are they working towards citizenship in their new homes?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different questions you have there. With supporting them into their future, we're really this bridge. Somebody comes into us homeless, has been through a lot of trauma perhaps, is really at a low point in their life, right? Like when you kind of hit rock bottom and you need that support out of your regular support system. So we're really this bridge from homelessness, and then we provide a lot of support to get them to a more secure future. So they come in and we've got wraparound social services. So at our sites, you'll see multidisciplinary teams, and it really takes a team. It's social workers that you're meeting with, doctors, psychologists, nurses, education specialists, somebody that's helping you find a job. So that's really, when they're with us, that's one of the, we provide a ton of support. And one thing that's really important to mention here, we do case plans, or they're called life plans in Latin America. We really meet a youth where they're at, like something that might work for you, Miranda, if you were in that situation or you had a little sister, may not work for somebody like Tanner. So we really try to get to know an individual and provide them the support that they need. Education is a big part of that. And how they're being educated, sometimes it's just a matter of getting them into school because they're homeless and they've been disconnected from their school system because maybe you're couch surfing or moving around. So just re-enrolling you in a school that may not be your district, but you have the right as a homeless youth in most states to be able to attend any school. Sometimes it's working on your GED. Other times in places in Latin America, some people have been living on the streets for a while and never were in school. So we have to start with like basic literacy classes so they can get to the point that they can enroll and participate in their public education system. Other times we have on-site programs at our sites, like in Toronto, where you can get education credits while you're in our education program. We have agreements with local school systems to get credits at our schools too. And we even have a charter school in our place in Detroit, Michigan. So we've got a lot of different options for education. In the communities you had also asked, we really try to work on prevention and educating people in communities. I think that's the majority of our work. Or once in Latin America, we like reintegrate children with kids. We have to work with their communities and their families so they don't become homeless again and leave. Working towards citizenship was your other question, Miranda. We do find, because we're located in Central America and Mexico, the United States, that's called the Central American Migration Corridor. So as you know, migration's always a hot topic, and you guys are probably very familiar with it in Texas being so close to the border. But what we do find is, like, for example, there'll be youth who are fleeing violence. There's gang violence in Honduras, so they'll want to make it to Mexico or the United States, and there we do work with youth and try to get them refugee status and asylum. So we work with them to become residents that lead to citizenship. A lot more of that work is done in Central America and Mexico. In Toronto, you have one of the most multicultural cities in the world, with some of the most the highest level of foreign-born nationals. So there's immigrants from all over, and we do work a lot in like big cities like that. Working them, and usually, and sometimes it means returning kids to their country. We'll work with them in the country if they're seeking something like asylum because it's unsafe for them to return to their country.
Awesome. I just have a really quick question. If you could explain the cycle of homelessness and how, like, specifically the Covenant House helps break that with homeless youth.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of homelessness, for example, I'll talk about in New York City, for example, there's poverty. A lot of kids will come from homes where there's poverty. On top of that, so the families don't have resources. And then you'll see that there's some kind of violence going on in the family. So there might be some kind of abuse or sexual exploitation, then can lead to, mental health or behavioral things. And at some point you have a home where it's just unsafe and unstable to go to. So then you find yourself couch surfing with friends, and then it doesn't work out, so you're on the street, but you go to a shelter, for example. But if you don't get the services to address some of the things, like get you so you're stable, so you have your mental health is taken care of, maybe you're working with an addiction program, you form healthy relationships, you don't fall back into that cycle of maybe an abusive relationship that you had in your family. And if you don't go back to school, it's like you could get a temporary, you have shelter, but if you're never fixing some of those core aspects, you might find yourself on the street again. So we find, and we work with youth this might be getting ahead, but I think it's important context here to what Covenant House does. In the United States and Canada, we work with youth ages 17 to 21 mostly. So these are young people who are aging out of social services like foster care. Like the government will take care of children in our country until 18, and then you become a legal adult in 18, and it's like, what do you do now? Like if you had to like all of a sudden just like provide for all of your needs, right? And you had no family to go home to, it's hard, like minimum wage, it's hard to find a job that pays good money and things like that. So because we find that these are young people with lots of talents and with difficult situations, we find if we're able to give them things like mental health, addiction support, find them affordable housing options, get them jobs so they can pay for that, and really kind of organize that environment for them and provide that structure, that's what kind of breaks that cycle. And it's all about empowering the individual so they can move out of that situation. You don't get caught in it. Because you do see a lot of times with homeless adults, and I think the addictions and mental health piece is really important too, because a lot of homeless adults have chronic mental health and addiction problems where it's just hard to ever gain stability in your life. And that's kind of this revolving door of like, how do you ever become sufficient for yourself? But since we work for young people, you might have something that you're struggling with at one time, but you can move through it too. Yeah. And kind
awesome.
of.
Thank you so much, Meredith.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So our next question is from Carson Smith.
I'm Carson, nice to meet you. So you actually just touched on my first question, which was, what's the age group that you guys generally take in? So my second question to that is like, how long are the kids generally staying in the Covenant House? Or how long are you assisting them until they're ready to go effectively into society? And what is that process like, which you kind of just touched on? So I just wanted to hear how long are you guys working with people generally, and what is that process like? And do people generally come back if they're having trouble?
Absolutely. Thanks for your questions. Just on the age thing, I do want to highlight what makes our work unique in Central America and Mexico is that we're working with underage. The average age is 12 to 18. So we are working with minors in those countries compared to young adults in the United States and Canada. And that age is really important to keep in mind because minors, even by the need protection, right? They're kids. We're their legal guardians and really protecting the rights of these children in countries where there aren't as strong child safety nets either. There's not a team of the administration of family and children here is the team that comes in and would remove you from a household if there was abuse or neglect. That's the one in New York City. And we have those in cities across the United States. That doesn't happen in Central America and Mexico so often. So we're really playing a role in protecting the kids that the government doesn't play as much. They stay with us, Carson. It really depends. There's always a first stage that they come, and it's really this this crisis stage and really gaining stability, because when you first walk into a shelter, like everything is brand new, and that takes an adaptation. It's not easy to live in a homeless shelter, especially when you have all these other issues going on in your life. So we really try to find stability there in the first couple of months. And then we find after that, and everybody's a little unique, but in the United States, usually 18 to 24 months, they're called, then the government provides funds for transitional living programs. That's what we find is like the time period that someone needs to really get into school, start getting their groove there, get a job, getting income, saving money so that you can actually then find a place to live. So in general, I would say 6 months to 2 years, depending on the person, they stay with us. I think I answered all of your, and you asked about, do people come back? People do come back. I mean, sometimes, I mentioned we have an open door policy. Honestly, sometimes it takes coming through our doors 7 or 8 times for some people. Some people come through and we change their lives right away. And sometimes it's like, they're just not ready, or there's a lot going on, and they decide to leave and then they come back. But I think that's also a hallmark of our program, that we don't give up on people either. Like life is tough. Like life can get tough for lots of people, and it's like there's a second chance, there's a third chance, there's a fourth chance. So we offer all of those chances, and a lot of those kids then, on the 6th or 7th chance, go on to success. And sadly, we wish that our services worked for everybody, but the reality is, for the majority, most definitely yes, but there are cases where you just find, maybe other help is better. We try our best, and those are probably the most difficult cases because everybody's so committed and you put so much into it, and you hate to see somebody that you care about, just not getting it together. So, sometimes that happens too.
Thank you. Our next question is from Rachel Maddie.
Hi, I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you. My question sort of has 2 parts. So I was just wondering what kind of support groups and scheduling, like structured scheduling within the Covenant House you offer to support the children, as well as do they typically remain pretty involved after they feel like they found a balance? Do you have any stories of like people coming back to help, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So with support groups, our work is really developed on, we've got these core principles in addition to our mission, and one of them is structure. So we're big on structure because we believe youth need to kind of walk into something that, you need freedom to make choices and be who you are, but also that have a structure that can kind of get you like, okay, this is when you need to be here, and this is when you need to go and look for jobs or school, and this is when you need to work with your case manager, and this is when we have dinner, and you have to, there's a lot of structure within that, which we find is helpful for a helpful scaffolding for youth to be able then to kind of create plans that they can, follow through with. But in addition to that, one of our principles is choice. Like, we're never forcing anybody to do anything. So there is even though we do provide that structure, it's not like you have to, people always have a sense of choice, and we just think choice is important and empowering people, because once you make decisions for yourself, you can tell somebody to do something 100 times, but not until you say, okay, I want to do that myself, does it work? So there's also that structure is combined with choice. And when it comes to other types of support groups, we have a lot. We have our classic therapy groups that can be supportive around different topics, like if people have experienced like an addiction support group, or if there's been any kind of exploitation, and people are dealing with a trauma that others can identify with. That's more of like a traditional psychology support, structure. We also have volunteers that come in and just support in things like interviewing and like learning different life skills. That's another one that we get support. Overall, it's a very supportive environment. Sometimes that's using like art or music, and we have people come in. So we really see lots of support. after people leave, it's interesting. We have many examples of people who have moved on and have become, families of their own, donors of Covenant House, doctors. They come back and volunteer. So we have a lot of alumni that do come back, even from like the 1990s, because we've been around for 40 years. So, and even past that. So we do have people that come back. Also, in Mexico, we have a program of youth who graduate from our work. They come back for like a mentoring support group, so they can really tell like those peers, it's more peer support that are going through it. Like I've been through this, I'm here to kind of help you as well. So that's woven into our work as well. And then there's a group of people that we don't know. They kind of move through homelessness, and we, in Latin America, we do follow up for 2 years, so we know they're doing well. But after that, it's kind of like, okay, I'm good. I've kind of left that stage in my life behind, right? And kind of moving on with life. So, other people decide not to come back to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Emma has the next question.
Great.
Hi, I'm Emma. My question, I know you touched on it a little bit. I was really curious about what resources you guys provide as far as like education and like helping them to obtain life skills. But then I know you just talked about how you guys do like follow-ups for 2 years. So can you just maybe like touch upon more of the resources that you guys provide after the children leave the Covenant House and what you guys do afterwards for them?
Absolutely. And I think I talked about the education one, but I think the life skills question is a big part of this, because in addition to homelessness and, getting jobs and getting into school, like that's fine. But you guys know what it takes. Like you need to learn how to budget and how to cook a good meal and how to interview so you actually land the job that you want. So I feel like life skills are a really important thing about what we do. Even like healthy relationships. You're not in a like crappy relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend that might turn into something that mirrors maybe an abuse that you saw in your family. So like building healthy relationship skills as well. And that it can even go towards like how to have really great customer service skills if you want to get into sales or something like that. So I feel like life skills are a really big part of it, Emma. Once they leave us, most of our work around follow-up is done in Latin America because of the following. Because we work with younger kids in Latin America, one of our key programs is family reintegration. In the United States and Canada, we're really working towards get your own apartment or with roommates and live on your own and be independent, when you're 21. But in Latin America, it's just very different, especially because we're working with children. You're not going to get an apartment at 14. It's just not possible. So as soon as we start working with a child, it's really important to work with the family so we can identify a safe family for them to go back to. So a lot of our work is with family reintegration. So once we reintegrate them successfully with a safe family, and sometimes that's not the family you come through from, sometimes that has to be an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor just because your family is not the safe place. When we reintegrate, we do follow-up for 2 years just to make sure that the household is still stable, that you're in school, you're kind of, moving along with all the things. We do even do a case plan for those 2 years just to make sure you have that support. And we're touching base with you in case you need any extra resources or support in that 2 year period, just to solidify that you're doing well.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we have one more question from a student that isn't here today, but I'll go ahead and ask it. It's kind of regarding just the heaviness of the topics that are dealt with at the Covenant House. So Hannah asks, we can only imagine how difficult it is to see the conditions and issues that many homeless children must face in everyday life. How do you manage your emotions on the job? And is it a challenge not making each child's case personal?
Yeah, great question. It kind of gets to the heart. I mean, it's hard work, like when you see and hear and work with kids coming from these situations. a couple of things. One, our organization really emphasizes self-care of staff. Like, we have to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others. Like, there's like secondary trauma when you work with people that have experienced a lot of trauma. So we have to do our own work with that, like take care of ourselves, find ways to de-stress, to process some of that, work with colleagues, and like, and taking care of ourselves can take up, be a lot of different things. But self-care is really emphasized in our organization because it's hard work. Another thing is we're always trained on professional boundaries. You really have to learn to become compassionate and professional, right? Like, you might want to become Facebook friends with, that person you're working with, and they send you a message and they're like, hey, I need help, but like professionally that is not helpful to anybody, right? So there's a lot of training around how to form compassionate professional boundaries with the youth that we work with that are really, really key to this work. So we do that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So my question really quick is that what can we do as college age students to kind of help with like the mission of the Covenant House, and like how could we get involved in something like the Covenant House?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I think we have this really exciting thing, and it's coming up on November 16th. It's the second year that we've done it. You should at the very least go check out the website, and maybe you even have enough time to organize one in a week, but it's called Sleep Out. I don't know. I think somebody had mentioned one in an email, but it's an experience. Basically, it's called Sleep Out America. So it's on one day when people, just like yourselves in all different situations across all 50 states, they sleep outside for one evening and they raise money among their peers. So it's this way that you get there, you get a personal experience of like, I'm sleeping out so a homeless child doesn't have to. You set up a fundraising page with your own goal that you think is reasonable for you. You send it to family and friends, and that's a really way that you can help raise money for Covenant House, but then you're also raising awareness around a really important social issue at the same time. And then people sleep out, sometimes at their schools, sometimes at their churches, sometimes just in their backyard, and unite with other people. It's called Sleep Out America. I have the web, I can email you guys the website, but it's called sleepoutamerica.com. And that's on November 16th. At the very least, please go check it out. We'd love for any of you. And if any of you have any specific questions about the Sleep Out ever, I'd be more than happy to personally answer them. The Sleep Out team is in the office next to mine. So I've got you're well connected to Sleep Out. And so that's really a great way to get involved. Another way that people get involved is that we do have where you can sign up for our newsletters, and at times when there's really important legislation that we're looking to pass in Congress, like this past one on sex trafficking, that you sign on and pledge just kind of support so that we can send that to Congress people to show that you're interested in these issues. That's another way. And then another way is do-it-yourself fundraisers. You're seeing this, some people say, I'm going to do a 30-day yoga challenge, or the next marathon I run, or I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or I've got my 21st birthday coming up and I don't want gifts this year. Please, I want to pick a charity of choice. We do have these and people can really customize them. They're called do-it-yourself fundraisers, and you set up your fundraising page and you kind of create an event. Some people throw parties and they say, I'm going to throw a big party and, I'm going to collect money for Covenant House. So that's also another way that you can get involved. And sometimes it's just, learning about homelessness in your own town, right? Taking interest in the issue and being curious, what's going on in Dallas with homeless youth, right? So that you can start to just be kind of informed about some of the issues, and there might be opportunities in your own area as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we've got about 10 minutes left. today, but just kind of want to open up the floor if anybody has any more questions for Meredith.
Yeah.
My name is Luke Okoro. I just kind of have a question about like what Covenant House's plan is from here on out. You guys are completely global, and is the plan to keep expanding or just to kind of stay in the regional areas you guys have strongholds in now? Or are you going to go to other countries, cities, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. That was part of your initial stream of questions. I'm like, you didn't ask that one. It was such a good question. So I'm glad you're asking that now. Our plan as a nonprofit, we do engage in strategic planning. So we have a strategic plan that goes for 4 years from 2016 to 2020, actually 5 years. And that's pretty common for nonprofits and businesses to have 3 or 5 year strategic plans. As part, the main pillars of that, one of them is expansion, where we really wanted across those 5 years to expand both our sites and the number of beds that we have. So since 2016, we've added 350 new beds to our network. So that makes us really happy that we can like reach more homeless youth. Also, as part of that, we opened our first shelter to that was new to open in the past, I think 10 or 15 years. We opened a shelter in Chicago in 2017. So that was really exciting. That was the first time we've not just adding beds to an existing site, but opening. With Chicago, it was interesting because we were doing a study of where should we open, and we were focused on the United States at that point. And there were cities that came up Las Vegas was one of them, that there's a need. I assume it's around some of just the culture and the gambling and what that kind of creates. Also, there was places in rural Alabama, in the deep South, where you see some poverty that has these things. But we decided to go with Chicago because it's one of the 5 largest cities in North America. There's really, there's poverty, there's rising rates of gang violence and things. So we just felt, and there was an opportunity to really partner with the city. So we decided to go there. It's interesting. We get asked all the time from people in Europe, especially because I'm on the the team that works internationally. Can you come to Africa? Can you come to Buenos Aires? What about places in Europe? We don't have any plans at the moment to expand globally, but who knows, maybe in the future we will, or maybe we'll figure out a way to provide technical assistance so people in other places can take our model and do that, but it's not currently part of our strategic plan. Another thing with reaching, expanding is expanding our reach on through social networks and things like that, so that there's resources and apps and things so that you can really, if you're a young person, you can really tap into us as a resource on your phone or the internet. So I think there's opportunity to expand that we will kind of see in the next years via technology.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Buenos dias. My name is Juan Gutierrez, and I had a question about the social aspect within the Covenant House, because I know that a social support system is a very big determinant of health. So I was wondering how individual or integrated the experience is for the youth that go through the program.
With specifically for what aspect of integrated in mental health, just to be able to
Yeah, so whenever they go forth and reach out for your services, and while they're under you guys' care
Right.
and resources from you guys, are they with other beneficiaries, or are they kind of just on the individual track and just kind of doing their own thing, or how much of a sense of community is the Covenant House to bring up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your question. Community is really important. I mean, these are individuals, so we, I had mentioned before, we always have to target, what would you one person kind of need, but that definitely is within the support of a community of peers within. So I think we get at some of that are also staying at Covenant House. We do get that through some of the support groups that we were talking about, where youth can participate. Sometimes we try to match youth with mentors as well. That's another support. We try as much as we can to really, like, sense of community is important, right? Because it's not just you, to your point, but you can like feel like you have other people in your support network. A lot of times somebody will make a really close bond with at least one caseworker or somebody that's really, you know, they identify with in some way. So that's an important relationship. And community is important. It's interesting. We kind of see community builds as time goes on. You can imagine yourself, you like walk into a homeless shelter and you might have some trust issues. It's like, I don't know if I should trust this person who's my roommate, right? Like, I have no idea who you are. So I think it definitely takes time to build that community. But we do a lot of community activities with, like, we do sports and recreation and take people out. So all these things that will also work to build that sense of community too. And we try to bring in, another aspect of that is we try to bring in people from the community to volunteer and like show that your immediate community wants to support you too. So we do work with a lot of volunteers as well.
Awesome. I kind of have a quick question. Mine's more of a personal question. Whenever like you've encountered like these kids that you work with, do you like recall a specific situation like that kind of like had a significant impact on you and like your role within the Covenant House?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. The whole reason I got into this, it was actually in Brazil. I have had situations in Covenant House of just individual youth that have really stood out and have impacted my work for sure. But when I was in Brazil, I was working at a very similar organization, and there was a youth who was kicked out of the shelter because of some behavioral issues, and it was Easter. And I remember he was like, and he had there was addictions going on, there was just a lot of behavioral stuff, and he was sitting on the wall of the shelter while like everybody was like eating and enjoying like candy and like an Easter lunch, and he was just like right on the outskirts. And for me, I don't know, I went up to him and I had given him something like my candy or something, and there's something like he was so grateful, but for me it was also this like, oh, it's this marginalized. I like working with some of the toughest kids, right? Like sometimes you can come in and you've got a success story and people are like, I'm on it, I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna get better and my life is there. And there's some that are really struggling, and this was somebody who was really struggling. He wanted, it was even physically, it was kind of on the inside and outside on the wall. So I've had a couple of experiences like that at Covenant House too, with like really difficult youth who are struggling that kind of end up making it, that have been very impactful. And they're kind of on the margins of even the homeless youth population, and it's those youth that really stick out to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Two more questions? Yeah.
Go for it.
My name's Lauren Earl. I was just wondering how y'all have seen your effect on like the cyclical poverty in like the areas where you are. Have you seen an increase in inflow or decrease, and does it vary per location?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It varies. I will be honest, we work with people who come from poverty a lot of times, but we don't work directly, with the poverty issues. We do, like, I live in New York City, and I've lived in New York City for the past 15 years. So I know some of the, the issues in New York City, and, it depends. It depends on the economy. If the economy is doing well and there's more jobs or there's not. It depends on who's the mayor. Is there a new mayor that's kind of in, and what kind of policies are they making in the cities that, are beneficial to homeless youth or not? So really that, I feel like when it comes to poverty, both federal kind of economic issues come into it in administration, but also local and city like policies around how they're addressing homeless youth. So it really does depend from city to city. In places like certain places in Central America, a lot of the kids come from, and not everybody is poor in Central America either. These are, we're talking about the most vulnerable folks, and I just like to mention that 'cause there's so much like cultural like diversity and heritage and so many like fantastic things. I'm like, oh, I'm always talking about like the poverty and the violence, which, you know, of course we know it's not all that, but there is a lot of that can be affected and changed too, depending on administration, depending on climate. You get something like a drought that will all of a sudden take out a crop, and then people find themselves, you know, a natural disaster that affects poverty. So there's so many things that are at play that always kind of are changing, between all the different cities where we work.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I think there was another one in the back.
I'm for it, but.
We got 2 minutes if you want to go for it.
Hi, my name is Garrett Weir. Thank you for speaking to us this morning. You asked us earlier, charged us to think about our own hometowns and where we're from. And I'm from San Diego, which Southern California in general is a big conduit for sex trafficking in the United States. So I was wondering about your work. I know you've expanded to deal a lot with South America, but within the United States, how are you guys working to combat the sex trafficking? And like homelessness, it definitely links together because San Diego has a huge homeless problem, huge sex trafficking problem. How are you guys working to combat that within the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. You know, a lot of that is through one is through policy, like the policy that passed to be able to make like protective laws for like online sex trafficking. Another way is like educating people about how to identify sex trafficking. Like a lot of people think like, oh, it happens, you know, it doesn't happen in my hometown, right? In knowing that somebody can be sex trafficked and working at a nail salon or working somewhere, and and I think it's doing a lot of education locally and kind of learning like what are the signs of human trafficking. You know, if you do notice it, what is this, you know, who do you call to do any kind of anonymous reporting? So a lot of that is around educating the public. And you're seeing more and more even public advertisements around sex trafficking that are out there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we just want to thank you so much for joining us in our class today. That's all the time we have for the interview, but thank you so much. We are so, so grateful for, just answering questions. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. You guys are a fantastic group. I loved all your questions, and you guys are such a smart group. I know you guys come from all different disciplines, but thank you so much in your interest on our organization around these issues. I encourage you, get involved with them or, you know, learn about them, because we all really can make a small difference. And if you have any questions about any of our work, I want to extend, you know, my email. You can get it from Tanner or Sara or Briana. If you have any questions about our work, please, I'm in kind of an open door, so to speak.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.
You too.